Deep in the woods of Oregon, a young grizzly bear cub, lost and starving, stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. But what he found inside wasn't food or shelter. It was a man, locked in alone and on the brink of death. No one knew he was there. No one was coming. What happened next would not only save a life, it would break every belief we thought we had about animals, memory, and compassion. This story isn't just unbelievable, it's unforgettable. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. The story you're about to hear will move you to your core. The storm had been building all morning. Clouds hung low over the Cascades, heavy with rain and ash from a distant lightning fire. The forest pulsed with a tense silence, the kind that comes before everything breaks loose. Down a forgotten trail, a small grizzly bear cub wandered alone. He was no more than 8 months old, his soft brown fur clumped with mud and pine needles. His ribs showed faintly through his sides. His steps were unsteady. He hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. He had been separated from his mother during the fire. The smoke had split the forest, and the last time he saw her, she was running the other way. Now he was just following instinct, hunger, and scent. His nose led him to a clearing most animals avoided, an overgrown field where blackberry vines clawed at old fencing, and the remnants of a dirt path led toward a weathered, decaying cabin. He paused at the tree line. Smoke, faint and stale. But underneath it, something else, human. He crept forward cautiously, claws barely making a sound over the wet earth. His stomach growled. His nose twitched. The cabin looked dead, windows boarded, porch sagging. No light. No sound. But as the cub circled the back of the building, he caught it again, that strange scent, familiar and foreign. Alive. His claws scratched softly at the moss-covered side door. The handle was rusted, broken, open just enough for a breeze to pass through. Then, a sound. Not loud. Not a cry. Just a breath, shallow, labored. From beneath the floorboards. The bear cub paused, nose to the crack, sniffed, scratched again. And then he let out a low, uncertain huff. Below the cabin, in the darkness of a damp, half-collapsed basement, Walter Hensley, 78, lay curled on a thin mattress beside a rusted oil tank. He hadn't stood in 2 days. His hip was broken from a fall down the basement steps. His flashlight had died hours ago. He hadn't had food since before the storm. The only thing keeping him alive was the gallon jug of rainwater he'd stashed last week, and sheer stubbornness. He tried to scream, but no one came. Then, suddenly, a sound above. Claws? No, heavier than that, a shuffling, a scraping, then breathing. Close. He tried to lift his head. Something alive was right above him. He waited for a growl, for the end. But instead, a soft, rhythmic scratching. He laughed, a dry, cracked sound in the dark. Well, I'll be damned. That's not death, he whispered. That's a bear. Then he closed his eyes and whispered again, and I hope he knows how to dig. A lost cub. A trapped man. 2 souls forgotten by the world, about to change each other's fate forever. It rained all night, not a gentle drizzle, a downpour fierce and cold. Water pooled in the uneven ground, soaked through the old beams of the cabin, and seeped into the basement corners. Walter Hensley lay half awake in the dark, pain lancing up his side every time he breathed too deeply. He'd used an old coat to cover himself. It did little. But what surprised him most wasn't the cold. It was the sound, still there, still above him. He blinked into the blackness, disoriented. Then remembered the bear. He expected it would have moved on, wandered off into the trees. That's what wild animals do. They don't wait around for old men to die. And yet, it hadn't. He could hear it. Scraping. Breathing. Digging. The cub had found a spot near the back wall where erosion had eaten away at the foundation. Old boards, rotted and soft from decades of wet seasons, had begun to splinter. The bear's claws, though small, worked methodically at the edges. At first, Walter thought he was hallucinating. Maybe it was the fever. Maybe the cold. But then something amazing happened. A faint sliver of light appeared. It cut through the corner of the basement like a blade. And then, a snout pushed through. Wet. Muddy. Quivering with breath. The cub let out a quiet huff and pulled back, only to push in again, widening the hole. Walter blinked, stunned. "You're actually trying, huh?" He chuckled once, then coughed hard, sharp pain stealing his breath. The cub disappeared for a moment. Walter figured he was gone. But minutes later, he was back, dragging what looked like a half-rotten log. Dropping it near the hole, he stepped up on it to gain height. With his new leverage, he clawed at the beam again. Each scrape echoed in the chamber like a metronome, counting down to what? Hope. Walter reached toward the sliver of light with one shaking hand. "Hey," he rasped. The cub paused. Looked at him through the gap. And didn't run. They stayed like that for a long moment. Just breathing. Just existing. Two creatures no one had come for. Two lives the world had quietly let go. But now, together. The next morning, Maya Jensen, the same wildlife officer from the River District, was responding to fire damage reports when she saw the cub's tracks near the tree line. She knew what they were immediately. But the location didn't make sense. There were no dens here. No females tagged in the area. Still, something in her gut tugged at her. She veered off course and followed the trail, not knowing she was walking toward a moment that would not only save a life, but rewrite what she believed about every animal she had ever known. He wasn't strong enough to lift the man. But he could bring the world to him, one claw at a time. Maya Jensen had spent 6 years tracking wildlife through the forests of western Oregon. She'd seen cougars on ridgelines, elk calves born in spring snow, even a gray wolf once, just a flash of silver vanishing between the trees. But this was different. The tracks didn't belong to a typical cub. They moved with hesitation, back and forth in a tight circle near an old overgrown path, as if the animal was lingering, searching, not for food, but for something else. She crouched beside a muddy print and touched the edge gently with her glove. "Grizzly," she whispered. "Young. Alone." But there hadn't been any known cubs in this region for over a year. The radio on her belt crackled, breaking the quiet. "Jensen, do you copy? You still on the fire line?" "I am. About 2 miles west. Found some unusual prints." "Copy. Call it in if it develops." She didn't reply. She was already moving. At the cabin, Hope, though no one yet called him that, had torn open the corner of the foundation. The hole was just wide enough now to let in full daylight. Walter could see the sky for the first time in 4 days. He could smell pine, hear wind, and see the bear cub, now covered in mud and breathing heavily, standing at the edge of the breach, eyes locked on him. "You're a damn miracle, kid," Walter croaked. The cub didn't move, didn't flee. Walter reached toward his coat pocket and pulled out a small rectangle, a faded orange emergency whistle. He'd always carried it on hikes, even in old age. He lifted it to his lips and blew. The sound pierced the forest like a scream. The cub flinched but stayed. Somewhere beyond the trees, Maya Jensen stopped in her tracks. Her eyes widened. She raised her radio. "Control, I just heard a whistle." Single tone, repeating. "Possible distress call." "From where?" She turned, scanning the tree line. "Northwest. Half a mile. Moving now." Minutes later, she reached the edge of the overgrown clearing and froze. A cabin collapsed in places, half swallowed by the woods. And movement, a small grizzly cub, soaked, panting, standing by a gap in the foundation. Maya raised both hands instinctively, but the bear didn't run. It looked at her, then back at the hole, then back at her again, like a signal, a warning, a message. Maya approached slowly. When she reached the wall, she heard it, a voice, weak but alive. "Hey. About damn time." She dropped to her knees and peered inside. And there he was, Walter Hensley, unshaven, pale, eyes blazing with humor and hunger. And above him, on the edge of the breach, the bear cub, watching, guarding. Maya stared in disbelief. The pieces fit in seconds, and she whispered aloud the truth no one would ever believe. But she knew, without doubt, he stayed to keep him alive. It wasn't instinct. It wasn't training. It was something older. The bear didn't just survive. He made sure someone else did too. Walter Hensley was airlifted out of the forest by nightfall. Hypothermia. Dehydration. A fractured pelvis. Infections starting. But alive. And every doctor, nurse, and ranger at the hospital asked the same thing: how did he last that long down there? The answer was complicated, because the truth, the real truth, didn't sound possible. "They'll think I hit my head," Walter muttered under his breath to the young EMT riding in the chopper. But when he told her anyway, when he said there was a bear cub who stayed, who dug through the wall, who waited beside him every day, she didn't laugh. She just stared and said softly, "Then you were never really alone, were you?" Back at the cabin, Maya stayed behind. She set up trail cams around the perimeter, not to capture footage for the press or the lab, but for proof. Because the cub hadn't run when they took Walter. He had circled the clearing twice, then disappeared back into the trees like a guardian that finished its duty. But Maya knew he might return. She stayed 2 nights. The third morning, just before dawn, the lens of the south cam picked up movement. The cub. He stood quietly near the porch, sniffing the air where Walter's scent lingered. Then slowly, he walked over to the hole he'd clawed open. He sniffed it once, and then, with 3 slow strokes, he started covering it with dirt again, burying the entry. Closing the story. That footage, silent and grainy in the early light, would go on to become one of the most widely viewed wildlife clips in modern history. No chase. No growl. Just a muddy bear cub sealing a rescue with his own paws. In the following weeks, news exploded: Grizzly Cub saves elderly man. Bear stays 4 days with injured stranger. The animal that refused to leave. Debates flared. Was it instinct? Was it curiosity? Was it coincidence? Maya didn't argue. She simply released the footage. Let the images speak. Let the forest speak. And quietly, beneath it all, Walter recovered. He watched the clip on a hospital tablet the same day it hit the internet. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally muttered, "I wasn't supposed to be found." A nurse nearby, folding sheets, said softly, But he found you? Walter nodded slowly and then whispered, "He didn't look at me like a man. He looked at me like a creature worth saving. It wasn't just a rescue. It was a message that in a world ready to forget the old, the broken, and the wild, one small bear remembered." The sanctuary offers started pouring in within a week: Montana, Colorado, British Columbia, even as far as Sweden. Everyone wanted the cub, the heroic bear that stayed. "We can give him a safe life. He'll never go hungry again." But Maya wasn't convinced. She'd spent years in wildlife rescue. She knew the difference between a creature raised in captivity and one shaped by the wild. And this cub, he wasn't looking for a pen. He was looking for purpose. Every print he left near the cabin was deliberate. He didn't scavenge trash. He didn't raid coolers or camps. He stayed near the trees, watching, listening, like he was waiting for one last confirmation that his job was done. Walter, now in a rehab center, was following the story from a quiet room with green walls and buzzing fluorescent lights. He asked to see Maya. She flew out the next day. They didn't speak much at first, just sat. Two people brought together by a bear and a basement. Finally, Walter spoke. "You still see him?" Maya nodded. "Trail cams catch him now and then. He's circling. But staying at a distance. Never aggressive." "He's smart," Walter muttered. "Smarter than me," Maya smiled. "You know they want to put him behind glass," he said, looking out the window. "I know." Walter leaned forward, his voice suddenly firmer. "Don't let them." She looked up. "I'm serious. If they turn that cub into an exhibit, then we missed the whole point." Maya didn't respond right away. She didn't need to, because she knew he was right. That night, back at the cabin, Maya removed the cameras, all of them. She packed the footage, archived it, and labeled it Hope, Final. Then, in the clearing, she did something else. She took a field flag, the kind used to mark territory lines, and wrote one word on it with a black Sharpie: "Free." She planted it in the middle of the clearing, then left. She never saw the cub again after that. But 2 weeks later, a ranger hiking 30 miles north found a fresh pine log clawed open in perfect symmetry. Beside it, a half-eaten squirrel lay on a flat rock. Not cached. Placed, like a gift. Like a message. Maya saw the photo and said only, "He knows." She could have caged him with kindness. But real love means stepping back and trusting the wild to finish what it started. Months passed. The fire-scarred ridge near the cabin had bloomed again, fresh shoots curling from ash. The forest was healing. Walter had moved back to his home, surprisingly independent for a man who'd nearly died underground. His gait was slow but steady. The cane he used came with pride, not shame. He didn't talk much about the bear anymore, not because he forgot, but because remembering felt private. Sacred. Maya still worked the territory. And in the silence of the trees, when she found herself alone, she sometimes felt a presence. Not threatening, just there. Watching. It was late autumn when it happened. A local reporter was filming a feature on post-fire regrowth. He hiked with a 2-person crew and a drone, narrating into the camera, pausing at charred stumps and resprouting ferns. Then the drone caught movement. Not just movement, a bear. Young. Brown. Powerful. And walking not away from the camera, but toward it. The footage was uploaded that night with the title, "Is this the famous rescue cub all grown up?" The video showed the bear walking through the trees, stopping at a downed log, then doing something no one expected. He stood up. Briefly. Like he had on the day Walter was lifted out by helicopter. Like he was saying goodbye. The clip went viral in hours. But the real story wasn't in the clicks. It was in the quiet after. Because 3 days later, Walter returned to the cabin. Just once. He parked his truck and walked slowly to the clearing. The air smelled like pine, smoke, and frost. He stood where the breach had been sealed and waited. He didn't call out. He didn't even look around. But after a long moment, he heard it, a low, deep huff. He turned. And 50 feet away, just behind a tree, stood the bear. Bigger now. Stronger. But unmistakable. Hope. They stared at each other for what felt like forever. Then the bear lowered his head and walked away. No drama. No noise. Just respect. Walter stayed another hour. Then left. When he got home, he called Maya. "He's all right," he said. And she somehow already knew. The world had moved on. But the forest hadn't forgotten. And neither had he. A year later, the cabin was gone. Not destroyed, gently dismantled. Boards removed. Nails collected. The foundation cleared and filled. Nothing left behind but grass, pine needles, and silence. By then, the bear was long gone. No confirmed sightings. No new tracks. Just memories, and a single message that kept echoing louder than ever. He stayed. The footage, now part of a permanent exhibit at the Oregon Wildlife Heritage Center, was shown daily in a darkened room. With no narration. Just the raw clips. The cub digging. The sliver of daylight in the basement wall. Walter's face emerging from the shadows. And the moment the bear returned, just once, to cover the hole again. Visitors cried. Not because of the danger. Not because of the survival. But because of the stillness. Because something in that little bear's eyes said, "I see you. I won't leave you behind." Walter passed away 2 years later, peacefully in his sleep. He was 81. At his request, no funeral. Just a small plaque, mounted near the edge of the forest clearing where he was found. It read, "Walter Hensley." He waited, and so did the bear. Maya was the one who planted the plaque. And she was the one who, years later, while hiking the same old trails, found something beside it. A branch cracked and laid carefully across a flat stone. And a single pine cone placed beside it. No paw prints. No fur. Just that. An offering. A sign. A memory. She didn't say anything. Just sat beside it. Let the wind pass through her jacket and hair and bones. And for the first time in years, she smiled without pain. Because she knew he had come back. Even if just once. Even if only to say, "Thank you for seeing me." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes animals feel more than we give them credit for. Sometimes the wild doesn't just survive. It remembers.